When the weather outside is frightful, the Hyundai Santa Fe is, delightful. Because it's got available H-Track all-wheel drive to make being out together better. Enter for your chance to win the newly redesigned Santa Fe, packed with all the jingle bells and whistles you need to go dashing through the snow together. To enter, visit Amazon.com/Hyundai or scan the QR code on specially marked red and green Amazon boxes. No purchase necessary. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details. When the weather outside is frightful, the Hyundai Santa Fe is, delightful. Because it's got available H-Track all-wheel drive to make being out together better. Enter for your chance to win the newly redesigned Santa Fe, packed with all the jingle bells and whistles you need to go dashing through the snow together. To enter, visit Amazon.com/Hyundai or scan the QR code on specially marked red and green Amazon boxes. No purchase necessary. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. Well, here's investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and the show is brought to you by CartKing.com. Now, you can call 877-986-7771. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Perhaps your current business wants to add multiple point-of-sale locations across the country quickly. Maybe the facility you manage could kickstart revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Well, CartKing.com can be the answer to your needs. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile retail, coffee, and food carts and kiosks that money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients and corporations across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. So what you do is you go to the website, cart-king.com. You check out the kind of cart that you think would apply to your business. You contact them, 877-986-7771. You tell them they'll custom build it for you, and then they'll ship it worldwide. So that's cartking.com. There's a little dash in there, too, between the cart and the king. Okay, we got today a real blockbuster for you. This is an incredible story. Our guest is Christopher Fulton. His website is cmfulton.com. Now, the book is called The Inheritance, Poison Fruit of JFK's Assassination. And basically what it is you know how the Secretary Lincoln, JFK's Secretary Lincoln, had a secretary named Lincoln, the state had some rocky ride over this. He actually wound up in prison over these documents that he obtained. Christopher Fulton, are you there?
Yes, Ed, thank you.
Thank you so much. What an incredible story. Tell us about yourself. Who is Christopher Fulton?
Oh, I came from a family that grew up outside of the district in Washington, D.C., and was supposed to go into the Naval Academy as a military officer, but I chose a career in commercial construction and wound up in Vancouver, British Columbia, building high-rise towers there.
Okay, and then how did you become involved? How did you obtain these documents?
A friend of mine, close friend of mine named Robert White. He lived in Catonsville, Baltimore, and he became kind of the surrogate son to Evelyn Lincoln, who was President John F. Kennedy's personal secretary. And during that relationship, Evelyn Lincoln had been given a large amount of material that was devoted to the investigation that Robert Kennedy had done on his brother's death and assassination, and what was kept of the back of the Oval Office recordings and certain things kept away from the FBI's investigation and the Johnson administration. When Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, the instructions were clear to keep those materials suppressed for the protection of the Kennedy family and the children. And subsequently, when she passed away in 1995, those materials, the bulk of those materials, came to Robert White, and then I wound up with some key evidence out of those materials, and it went on from there.
Well, give us an idea. What is in the material?
Well, there was it's hard to scope it in completion, but we're talking about over $100,000 documents, personal correspondence, and of course Evelyn Lincoln's inside information about this, which are instructions from Robert Kennedy and so forth. But I personally wound up with the closest physical evidence to President Kennedy's head wounds in the limousine in Dallas, and I wound up with the non-reviewed Oval Office recordings, which he was doing to keep people on record and keeping himself protected in that way. It was there were recordings that were happening at that time in the Oval Office and other places were secret for him personally. And Bobby Kennedy, of course, was reviewing those materials when he was assassinated, when he died, and those recordings. I was the first person to listen to those recordings since Bobby Kennedy's assassination.
Yeah, the book is over 500 pages long, and I suppose the last 200 about pages are just photos and documents and records and all kinds of stuff, right?
Obviously, in a federal investigation and a federal case file, there are boxes of documentation. My publisher had asked if I would submit some of those to be placed in the book. I gave him just a random amount of documentation to do so, and then he chose from that and placed some of those materials in the back of the book.
And a lot more of that material is available at cmfulton.com?
Well, you can see the materials that are in the book themselves, the ones that have been printed, and I highly suggest that someone does go to the website. You can see very clear images of those materials, which include the Justice Department information, the subpoena that was given to Robert White to testify in front of the Assassination Records Review Board, and I was supposed to testify as well. The Assassination Records Review Board under President Clinton was very concerned about the materials that come through Evelyn Lincoln, and they wanted to understand them to get a clear picture on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So as this was proceeding, Robert White was very concerned that these materials would be confiscated and classified from him before the American public would get a chance to see them. And of course, that's exactly what happened. And he was contacted by President Reagan and given instruction. I was contacted by CSIS, which is the intelligence services in Canada at the time. And the American public has been blind to a lot of this. They have not been able to see what was taking place with the Kennedy family and the Justice Department during that period.
Well, give us a description then. What was taking place with the Kennedy family and the Justice Department?
Well, when I realized what we were involved with and what we were been given, what the enormity of what we had, I'd actually through my job or my work in British Columbia, I was invited to go to Moscow. And this was early on, and I went to Moscow and under the guise of doing updating of flats in Moscow for the people that were coming in for oil production and international business. So I went there. I was invited to the Kremlin. As I was invited to the Kremlin, I met a gentleman there, and I didn't know who he was, but he turned out to be the head of their intelligence services, and he was starting to brief me on the fact that he was aware that we had inherited this material and what had taken place between them and Robert Kennedy to prevent World War III just after the assassination in secret. And here I am in the Kremlin, found myself in the Kremlin, kind of blindsided, being briefed by the head of their intelligence services and concerned about what we were going to do with these materials and if we want to release them through Russia without censorship. And of course, I got very panicked about all of that and just said, listen, I appreciate the meeting and I thank you very much for that, but I don't have any information that could be helpful. And I excused myself and was hoping I could get out of Russia, and I was very thankful to leave.
When you returned to the United States, were you debriefed by the CIA or State Department about your activities in Russia?
Well, when I returned to the United States, I remember coming in and I kissed the ground. I was very happy that I got out of Russia, but the U.S. government really had to play catch up on a lot of this. I know that they were notified. I found out later that they were notified. The CIA had been notified that we had received materials, and they weren't sure the the extent of what we had or what we do with them. So as this progressed, I actually tried to contact the Kennedy family. I contacted Caroline Kennedy in 1996. That was through Warren P. Whiteman, who was the vice president of Sotheby's. They'd handled the Jacqueline Kennedy sale, and I was told that would be a good way to make contact. So I did that. Take materials in the room for about an hour. I was told to do this. I was very certain that she would contact discuss with Uncle Ted Kennedy, and did not want to proceed at that time for any kind of transfer material to the family. So we continued this process and tried to figure out the best way to handle it. We were looking at a book being put out. We were looking at a museum. Robert White was very desperate to open a museum for the American public and to show off what he could. But as this progressed along, the doors kept shutting, and the government, I guess, was learning as it was going along as we were. And we wound up in 1998 going to see Robert to raise funds so that he can open up a museum. Now, I was invited to go into that sale, and I went into that sale, and the media began to gain attention. So CNN, my material was on CNN and Entertainment Tonight, and multiple other programs in New York, and I was asked to do interviews, and I thought, my God, I'm not going to open myself up to that. I turned down every interview request that I had. Katie Couric had asked to interview me and so forth. I said, no, I'm not interested in doing that. But when that took place, the lawyers for the White House and the lawyers for the Kennedy family got involved. The Justice Department got involved. Other agencies got involved. The AARB, the Security Oversight Office, got involved, who declared that Robert White and myself had items of national security concern. And when that took place, they were trying to figure out they were going to shut that sale down. The Justice Department was going to shut it down. Private agreements were drawn up with Robert White, with the Justice Department and the Kennedy family. The FBI came in, I think, on maybe 2 or 3 different occasions, maybe more, and took materials from him for classification that should have been really shown to the American public so they could better understand what had taken place in Dallas. And those materials are now secured, and the American public will not get to see them. My name appears again in the ARB investigation under President Clinton on this, but again, I didn't get to testify. So we did a 30-day investigation with the archives and found that one of the important files on this, a whole box folder involved in these discretionary matters, are missing. They're aware that they were there and they're aware that they exist, but they're just gone. There's no pull slip on that from what agency or who pulled it, but they're not there for people to see. So when President Trump had attempted to go ahead and release these files to the National Archives, I'm aware that my material is not there. A lot of Robert White's materials are not there, and of course we've been notified through President Reagan that other materials have long since been removed that were pertinent, and those materials are missing. So even if there was a full release or disclosure at this time, the American public still wouldn't be getting the full picture. So I thought it was very important that I owed it to the people that had perished, including members of my own family, over this, that I write the book and not leave it in the lap of my children, but to bring it forward for the American people to decide for themselves.
What was Caroline Kennedy disturbed about when she saw the documents?
It was disinformation. White, not totally, but he informed me that she was quite concerned about this, and I'm sure how far I want to go into it here, but with her or as soon as that myself and the family ended. So in 1996, I was not given direction on how to handle this, which would have been very beneficial for me at that time.
Now, Evelyn Lincoln first possessed this material, and it came into her possession. And now, but the FBI was unaware of what was in this material in order to make it classified way back then, before it got into her hands?
Robert Kennedy was in a desperate battle after the assassination. Within 24 hours of the assassination, Robert Kennedy was fully aware of basically aware of what had transpired in Dallas. He was faced with the enormity of how to handle this. And again, I don't think the American public understands what was at stake. we had a Cuban Missile Crisis, and people understand what that was involved with. But this was an ongoing process. It did not end there. And Robert Kennedy and President Kennedy were looking at the statistics of American casualties, American citizens lost. If we had a first strike with Moscow, I think it was like 42 million civilians would have been killed. And then if they just put their foot down on this and said, listen, we're not going to go there. We're not going to do this. Every American citizen, every life is important, and we're going to do whatever we have to do to stop that from happening. And we go to the sources themselves, and if we have to, we put our own lives on the line over this, and that's exactly what they did. But Robert Kennedy, in the wake of the assassination of his brother, was very much left with an enormity of that. And if he had taken this documented information to the American public or put it through the process of disclosure, then as the Attorney General, the Johnson administration would have taken the position that Cuba is the catalyst of this, and of course Russia involvement, and we would have gone to war. The Russians were ready to go to war, ready to exchange visits at that time. They were very concerned that somebody from the Pentagon would let the missiles fly, and Robert Kennedy took it upon himself to take the information that he had and share it with the Russians covertly and say, listen, I'm aware that you're not responsible for this, and I'm not going to follow any course of action that will take us to war. The Russians have actually put a great deal of pressure on the Johnson administration, wanting to know that they weren't going to have a surprise attack over this. And basically the Warren Commission, which the American people were given to satisfy the best truth to let this proceed, was in a lot of pressure of the Russian government. It wasn't for the direct benefit of the American people. It was for the Russian government to understand that we've gone public, that they weren't directly responsible, and there'd be no misinterpretation of attack.
Okay, I'm a little bit confused. You're not claiming that these documents pin this murder and the assassination on the Russians?
No, just the opposite. Actually, right. The Russian government was very interested that this information, any information that they had that was documented, get released. But there were plans in place, and a lot of people don't understand this. Oswald's position in this. It's not what people think. The history books are written in a certain way, and it's not that at all. A lot of the information that's in the case files of Oswald have been placed there for purpose beforehand, so that he was in a trap position on this when this occurred as well. I mean, obviously they had plans for him, and those plans changed when President Kennedy was assassinated. So the American public does not have a lot of the correct information or disclosure on this, and of course I have to walk a very fine line between what's important for the American public to know, and then the privacy and protection of the Kennedy family also. Because
some of them that you have fine.
There is information that's still classified, and the department was quite concerned when they interrogated me. They'd given me they'd sweated me out for about a year, and then they kind of threatened my family, and I said, listen, we'll go to the table on this. And they gave me a blanket immunity for testimony and on the matter, which is amazing considering these are from 1963 and from 1960. But they gave me a blanket immunity from prosecution for this government or any other government to pursue, and for myself and my family. So that in that regard, I went in and was briefed on several occasions by the Justice Department intelligence community under perjury ramifications. And of course, if I had lied, the FBI would have investigated that, and I'd still be in prison now. But I told them the information correctly, and they investigated that, and they wanted to know what the plans were and what this was going to be utilized for, and who was exposed, and where did who was I working for someone who would give me orders and so forth and so on. So they were very interested in knowing exactly what the plans were. And of course, one of the concerns was, was there going to be a case that was going to be opened or tried to be opened through Texas, the open availability of a murder investigation down there. There was no such plan able for that. That had been discussed.
Okay, let's take a little commercial break. We're here today with Christopher Fulton. This is a fascinating story. He's the author of The Inheritance, Poisoned Fruit of JFK's Assassination. You can find his website at cmfulton.com. Also, too, keep an eye out for him on the 21st, November 21st, 10 p.m. He's going to be on Coast to Coast AM over there for about 4 hours. I think it's like a 4-hour show. So he'll be able to go into a lot more detail there. Keep an eye out at the 21st Coast to Coast AM. We'll be right back with more of Christopher Fulton after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe add new point-of-sale locations across the country quickly, or bring in revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services to your office building, warehouse, or lobby? CartKing.com is the answer to your need. CartKing.com is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, carts, and kiosks that money can buy. For 20 years, CartKing.com has been working with clients across America to provide indoor and outdoor carts and kiosks for any application. That's www.cart-king.com. Give them a call at 877-986-7771. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you. So you go to the website, CartKing.com, you check out their different designs and models. You pick out which design applies to your business. They'll custom design it for you, custom build it for you, and ship it worldwide. CartKing.com. PureSoapFlakes.com. 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of the Castile soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with Pure Soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. Order today at PureSoapFlakes.com, greenhome.com, Amazon.com, or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
Hey you, podcast listener, this is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. Take the blue pill. You wake up in your bed and go back to listening to mundane podcasts that won't challenge your religious beliefs and your so-called truths about reality, the universe, and consciousness. Take the red pill. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast, hosted by Mark Anthony Peterson, and he will show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Event Horizon takes a walk into the paranormal with a splash of conspiracy. It's the podcast that would be born if David Icke and the X-Files had a baby. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast by Mark Anthony Peterson on Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Stitcher, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms. Remember, all we are offering is the truth, nothing more.
It's the Opperman Report here at Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the report. I'm proud to admit we're thinking about this. Where's the fruit of JFK assassination? Author with us and the man's life in the book. Christopher Fulton. His website is cmfulton.com. There's a lot of additional content on there. And also to check him out coming up on November 21st on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. So Christopher, now you said that you were given immunity and then you gave a sworn statement. You testified. Was this at a proceeding or just like a deposition type thing, interview?
These were closed hearings through the Fourth Circuit in Maryland. These were classified testimony in front of the Justice Department and the intelligence community, and the charges they didn't want me to testify in front of the Assassination Records Review Board, and instead of allowing me to do that, I guess they thought my evidence was too controversial, was going to cause too many stuff. So what they did is they issued a warrant and indictment of charges that occurred from something that occurred 6 years prior, which I had signed a federal loan guarantee with my income in the United States was not stated correctly. So that they claimed that to be fraudulent. And then, of course, the IRS had stated that I failed to I evaded reporting requirements within the United States. So they brought me into those charges from 6 years earlier, but I was facing under this national security guise. They were threatening me with 50 years of imprisonment over this.
Yeah.
And they're very, very heavy-handed, and they have ways of doing that under the statutes. Basically, I was told to, if I cooperated with this, and I would allow them to interrogate me so they could understand the parameters of this correctly, that I would be given a much lighter sentence, which I did. I was helped by a federal judge and a U.S. senator when I got out, and I was lucky to serve my time and get through that. It was very unpleasant experience, to say the least, but at least I was able to come out on the other side.
So you actually did time for fudging income on a mortgage application?
I did. Well, yes. I mean, actually they had a separate individual account for me for every time I used the ATM machine.
Yeah.
Every time I used a credit card.
Yeah. And also, too, I bet anytime you mail something, U.S. postal mail fraud too. Right?
Anything they could do, and they can tally this up on a tally tape, however they want to do it. You can be looking at a lot of time, and of course, if they want to make it stick, they can try to make that stick. To the federal government, they can do what they will, but the realities of it are that they're very heavy-handed, and they wanted me to take it very seriously. And of course, when I was placed on the most wanted list for a while, which they said was a mistake. I was an armed and dangerous person, and the foreign government was told through the State Department and everything else to cooperate on this immediately. It was a very serious thing, and I went through the resolve of this and learned very quickly that I may not make it through this. So I was going to be cooperative about this, obviously, but at the same time, I just wanted I wanted justice to prevail. But we were looking at a suppression, and that's one of the main reasons the book exists. Is that the book wasn't written for any other purpose but to share with the American people what I had been told by important figures in all of this, and what I had to what I went through, what I experienced from a first-hand perspective, so that they could take a ride with me and understand it, and then they can look through whatever filter they like, but at least they have the information.
And what have you been told?
Well, I was told that there was a coup that took place to change the power structure in this country, and the American public was not allowed the information to understand all of that for reason to keep us out of war with Russia. One of the amazing things is that there's just so little understanding of why the Kennedy brothers were killed and what this was all about. And since World War II, we'd been given the position that we were going to be the superpower in the world, and how we're going to deal with that, and how we're going to keep that alive. And we had weapons now of such mass destruction that we were very concerned how this was all going to be handled. And there was an idea on the table since World War II that we were going to take Moscow out first. If you take Moscow out first, then communism falls, the rest of the country infrastructure would fall, and this problem would be resolved. And while we have the missile gap heavily in our favor, which was not known at the time, we had a very much more capability than Russia did, but the consensus was that if we don't do this in 62, or if we don't do this in 63, that it's going to get out of hand, and we're going to have a problem where an exchange is going to take place, or we're going to lose our position in the world, and democracy is going to have a problem. And the Kennedy brothers were faced with this dilemma that was put on their desk. It landed on their table. So they said, when they reviewed this, the Kennedy brothers had a very different approach to this. The world was changing, and every life was important, and people weren't going to be used as pawns. And they dedicated their lives and lost their lives over this exact issue. Cuba was used as a catalyst in between this endeavor, and President Kennedy had sidestepped some of the intelligence community and the Pentagon on this, and gone directly to the source in Russia, and asked for cooperation through NASA to lessen the chance of a ongoing pursuit of missile capability, and the better chance that we would have a peaceful resolve to all of this. And of course, the people that were entrenched before President Kennedy had come in were enraged by how he was handling this, and they were very concerned that the United States was going in the wrong direction and that we were very, making ourselves more vulnerable. It's better to use a heavy hand. And Vietnam was a planned 10-year program in Vietnam to show the Russians that not only would we stop communism spreading through Asia, but we'd be ruthless, and it didn't matter if there was families involved or children involved. We'd wipe out indiscriminately and show them that that's the kind of resolve that we're taking, and that's the kind of position we're taking. President Kennedy thought that was appalling and was going to pull our advisors and our troops back out of Vietnam. He said he was going to be the least popular president in 1964 in U.S. history, but he was referring to the within his own government structure, not the American public.
Now, you were told this, or you saw this in the documents?
I have read documentation. I have listened to the Oval Office recordings where the president is talking directly to other individuals, and he's involved in these things. I've also spoken with Mr. Robert Bauch, who was the head of the Protective Research Section for the Secret Service in the White House, that worked very close with Bobby Kennedy after the assassination. Material that had come through Evelyn Lincoln. Some of those materials were obviously made for the American public, and some were private. But she was with President Kennedy every day, and there was no doubt that she was the most intimate, other than his brother, the intimate person that was with him on a daily basis, and was privy to a lot of this. And of course, she was very scared when this happened. She was terrified that Johnson had come into the Oval Office, and that she was, and rightfully so. So I mean, she took her instructions from Robert Kennedy on how to deal with this. Robert Kennedy, within 24 hours, went from the second most powerful person in the world, maybe even considered a co-presidency in his case, as Attorney General and so forth, to just a lame lawyer. They wouldn't even send a car to pick him up from work for work. So he was faced with the dilemma: how do I deal with this? The Russian side had notified me and told me, said, we thought he was going to enact another coup against the Johnson administration and take over. The FBI certainly was looking at that possibility. But to his credit, he said, no, I'm going to work within this structure. I'm not going to cause any more death, and I'm certainly not going to risk any more American lives over this, and I'm going to have to swallow this and pursue this to the end of the day. So he, to his credit, he was faced with an almost impossible situation, and tried to do what he could, sign agreements so that he would not testify at the Warren Commission, and he would not made agreements that he would not pursue this. He would accept the terms of the Warren Commission. He became a U.S. senator, but as the country became more divided and was falling apart over Vietnam, and thousands of our men were dying over there, he wanted desperately to get back to what his brother had put in place, and he said, no, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to run in 1968. That's where I was supposed to be, and I'm going to stand up and do what I was supposed to do. Of course, Johnson took the position that I'm not going to run against you. I'm not going to take the nomination to my party for the second term. And but Robert Kennedy made some errors in that, and made a speech that publicly said that he would open up these records when he became president of the United States. And of course, he didn't make that. So,
but you think the Russians believed that Robert Kennedy might assassinate Johnson?
Not assassinate directly, but enact a coup of taking power away from the administration in such a way where you're releasing information to them, showing that the Johnson administration was illegal.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, and you were told this, or you determined this by reading the documents?
Again, it's hard to cover this in a short span of time, and I tend to run there's just so much information. But this came to us through many different channels. Through the Secret Service, the president, who were more aware of all the facts than the President of the States would be. It was a very amazing statement coming from President Reagan. The truth of the matter is, President told the work he would commit to step on toe this. President Johnson said he would come to the information on each other. President Nixon, Johnson was very concerned about who came next and didn't want to make sure that his administration was considered an illegal administration. So they were all very concerned about what would be coming out about this. President Kennedy was an extremely brave individual, and he was looking at whether we were going to continue as a peaceful world, or we were going to be not annihilated. He felt if there was an exchange that happened in any condition, that there was no winners. There'd be no winners. We'd all lose. So he took a very bold and firm stance on this, and paid with it with his life.
So Johnson was aware of the coup, and he benefited from it. Was he one of the plotters?
Well, I don't want to give too much away out of the book of what's in the book, but Johnson was certainly aware that there was a position that was taken to push President Kennedy into a no-win situation, whether they had to through a false flag or not, to make the American public get behind an invasion of Cuba. So not only was he aware of that, but President Kennedy was also aware of the dangerous position he was in and what he was dealing with. So it was a very high stakes game. It's a game, in my opinion, that we lost. It shouldn't have. It wouldn't have happened. And we lost 58,000 American lives in a situation to deter the resolve of the Russians. That was a substitute rather than going to war. And of course, as an American and listening to all of this and learning all of this, it's heart-wrenching.
Are you under any restrictions right now, national security type restrictions of what you can talk about?
I have not signed the Secrecies Act, and my agreements with the Justice Department go as far as no prosecution involved with what they are aware of that I know, and also the fact that I have Oval Office recordings that have been non-reviewed. But as far as that, that's as far as it goes. But I do have to be careful. I certainly don't want to harm any innocent parties that could be involved directly or indirectly, and I certainly want to take responsibility to not say anything that would harm the security or the interests of the United States. Most things that were laws that were going to really should have been an open forum for the American people.
And just to back up a little bit too, now when you testified under oath, you were given that immunity and you testified. Did the Department? I guess it's the Department of Justice that went after you, right?
That's correct. Yeah. And I should mention that the Department of Justice, as I understand it, so that the American people understand, they're not going to pursue anything in this case because they've been given full power on the Kennedy concern, so that it falls in the Justice Department's lap. But they're not going to pursue anything because there's no prosecutions at the end of the day. Without a prosecution, they're not interested in pursuing this. The only thing they would be required to do by law is if there was new evidence tendered that the Kennedy family themselves that were pushing an agenda through Texas. But other than that, they have no interest or no directive to pursue anything but to bring in evidence into the fold under the Assassination Records Review Board that existed at that time and then classify the material if that's what needs to be done.
Now, when you were during that process, did they ever seize all these documents and material and go through it all, or did they ever have possession of it?
The FBI had come in several times with Robert White and seized materials from him, and then they were reviewed and subsequently classified. Some of those materials included the Secret Service logs and information on the bubble top and seating arrangements for the original autopsy materials, things of that nature.
And that material was seized and never returned?
That's correct.
Okay, so it was classified as top secret and it wasn't returned back to you. Oh, my God. This is fascinating stuff. Okay, but I want to go back again. I want to know, like, what I'm asking you about, okay, obviously Johnson was involved and he brings in Nixon. Nixon's on his team. They're both. But the other succession of presidents, who was aware of what happened? And do we know? Oh, and which side did they take? Like Jimmy Carter, Reagan?
I mean, for an example, I think Carter actually wanted to bring this forward. And he did, from what I was told, push an agenda for this and was told by the director of the CIA, which was George Bush at the time, that he didn't have a need to know and to stop following that line. Mr. Ford had testified through Congress, through the Warren Commission, and aligned himself with the position of a single shooter, which eliminated a conspiracy and eliminated some of the concerns about going to a war with Russia. So they he was rewarded as it went on going. Now, President Reagan was very interested in this material coming forward. He asked us both to pray about it and to do what we thought was right, but he felt the government had become the biggest problem that we have, and it was time that the American public be informed and be able to make these decisions ongoing.
Now, with Reagan, was his interest before or after the attempt on his life?
Reagan had an interest. I mean, what I'd been told, that he had debated Robert Kennedy. I don't know if it was 67 or 68. I can't remember now, but he said that Robert Kennedy was very concerned about the domestic issues and the domestic problems of corruption and other things that were going on. And these are the problems that we needed to address immediately. But Reagan had taken the position that it was the outside forces and the Russians were still the main concern. But he says that after I had been shot at and I went through that process, I realized that a lot of things that Bobby Kennedy said was correct, and that his position publicly had been wrong.
Now, where do you get that information from? Directly from Reagan, or this is someone told you this?
That came directly from Reagan, and
wow.
Through yeah.
Wow.
Now, like I say, Reagan had met. Yeah, President Reagan was very interested in this, and he was the one that's actually giving us a heads up that we were going to have to testify about these materials. That there was interested parties, and that they would, and they're not even sure what materials were in there. Nobody. These materials were locked down through Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy was the Attorney General of the United States. He understood the legal process. He was pushed very hard-handed by the Johnson administration and the FBI to turn over these materials, and there was infighting. There was definite infighting over this, and President Reagan had discussed that. So once these materials were secured by Robert Kennedy in a way that they couldn't grab hold of them or know what was going on, Robert Kennedy was using that information to gain more strength and more power and to continue on the process, but he didn't make it. So after the instructions were to Evelyn Lincoln and to Robert Bauch to keep these, that had been very instrumental in securing these things through the Secret Service, who was the ones that were collecting a lot of these things after the assassination, to lock these down, keep them secure, do not discuss it, keep the family safe. And obviously, if I didn't make it, the buck stops here. The family's not going to be able to continue. So, of course, Ted Kennedy did not step up, wasn't able to step up after that, and everything went silent.
And then off the air, we had mentioned something in '98 about what's his name, Clinton. Where did Clinton fall into this? Which side?
Well, President Clinton and his wife was President's credit. He personally stepped up, I think, 2 times, two different years to keep the arbitration. They had subpoena powers, and they had the ability to collect information on this from anybody or any source in the world. But of course, I think he ran into his own problems with the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and of course he had to defend himself on that. And so it's one of those situations where they're even when the House Select Committee did their investigation, the materials were not available to the House Select Committee. So if investigative bodies don't have the evidence, they can't review them independently. How is this going to be a full picture for the American public?
Have you been contacted by any of the high-profile JFK researchers asking to coordinate with you?
Well, I've had amazing response from the book of federal judges that have got involved, and I had a contact by the professor about a week ago. I won't name a name, but in case he doesn't want to be mentioned, but his resume is so long I couldn't get through it, but he knows everybody, Maureen Oswald and all these different individuals by name, and knows everybody personally and been involved in this for decades. And he's in his 70s now. And he said, I've read your book. And he says, in my personal opinion, I believe this is the best book ever written on this subject as far as President Kennedy is concerned and what happened. And I took that as a great compliment coming from him. But yes, I've had some interesting people contact me, and it's been I'm very pleased. Obviously, you write something like this, you don't know what's going to happen, but most sponsors have been overwhelmingly supportive, and very emotional. I've had some people actually cry. I apologized, and they said no. They welcomed it. They thanked closure on it. How do you deal with that? What do you say to that? It's not my. I went through this, but it's really not my story. It's really about everybody. It's really about all this information that should have been at some point aired, and I was able to share my part of it.
And what is your goal at this point? Like, you want to establish a library with all this information where the average person go and review it?
All I could do at this juncture was to try to take people through the experience that I had, share with them who was involved and what was taking place in 1998 when it seemed to have, there was kind of a bright spot there for a moment, and it seemed like this was coming forward and was going to be addressed by John F. Kennedy Jr.
Right.
I was very encouraged by that, and I thought, my God, this could make an impact and may change the direction of the country. But that didn't happen, and it went very differently, went very badly. Of course, I was serving federal at the time when John F. Kennedy Jr. died, and my lawyer perished in this, died, and my mother perished, and perished. There's a lot of people that have dropped along the way on this, and I'm constantly lying. So I figured, well, I held it back. I didn't want to think about it. I wake up with nightmares every other day and about this. And I said, well, finally, I've come to the conclusion in my life that it just, the records did not come out and the release through to President Trump. And I thought, God, I owe this to President Kennedy and Senator Kennedy, and I owe it to John F. Kennedy Jr. I owe it to Evelyn Lincoln and the people involved in this. And I owe it to the American people involved just to share the story.
What was your problem, John F. Jr.?
Well, I'd like to keep that for the book, but I think people misunderstand John Jr.'s position on this. I think most people would think he was not as interested in these things and was given direction by his mother to stay out of it. And of course he was, but at the same time, he was very much interested in pursuing this from me and from other sources. He had done an interview with Castro and taken his time to get his facts straight, and he had worked very hard to get his magazine up and going, which was a open forum in U.S. politics and a very important magazine. It may have been one of the most important, if not the most important magazine on politics in the country at that time. And of course, and if he had come forward with information about his father's death and about his uncle's assassination, it would not have been censored. It would have been allowed to go forward. And of course, coming from him, it would have had weight and would have had substance and would have had an immediate impact.
And so, do you find his death suspicious?
Well, I've been instructed not to comment about that. Like I said, he was very interested in gaining the information, the evidence that I had from the limousine. There was money on the table involved in that transfer. Again, I'd like to leave some of that information for the readers to have in the book.
Okay. Now, also, too, after reviewing all this material, have you come to conclusions of the nuts and bolts, like who the shooters were, the assassination teams, that kind of stuff?
I understand from what we were exposed to and briefed upon that I understand the parameters of this and what place and what happened. As far as who pulled the trigger, you have to think. I know that that's something that people concentrate on with the very heated intensity. But whether you work in a mobster position or an intelligence officer or a foreign officer or anything else, you work under instruction, under orders, and things happen for reasons. One who pulled a trigger was given that order to do so and thought they were operating into he was given. So that I'm more interested in sharing a story of what happened to me, and it does give the overall parameters what happened on, including a 9-day countdown when President Kennedy was in Dallas of what the resolve was going to be and what they were trying to do with Cuba. Mm-hmm. Because that was the catalyst of whether we were going to go to war, whether we were going to have a peaceful nation, whether we were going to democracy was going to be surviving, and President Kennedy was putting it all on the line for the American people. He was very much of a constitutional president. I can tell you from listening to the recordings, he put the American people first. Every American life was extremely important to him, and he sacrificed his life for the betterment of the world and for the rest of us.
Well, so have you. Can you tell us a little bit more about how much time you spent in prison? Do you have a felony conviction right now? Was there parole, probation? How has it affected your life since you got out?
Well, I mean, obviously I have a federal conviction. It's interesting from a foreign government standpoint who contacted me and said, we don't consider you to have a criminal record. What we consider is you breached an agreement or had a problem with the United States government. I find that very interesting that one government has one perspective and the other government has a entirely different perspective. But yes, it's affected my life and it's affected my rights and it certainly is a concerning thing. I think about that quite often. If you have a 3-strike rule in the federal system, you're going in for automatic life, and life in the federal system is life. You don't get out. There is no
good time,
early release. No, you're dying in a facility. Period. And when they've got your DNA at Quantico, Virginia, and they have all that information on you, you do think about that, and it is a concern. Now, obviously, I haven't jaywalked since this period of time, and I like to think of myself as a mature and upstanding citizen that breaks no rules or laws, but at the same time, you have to think of agendas and be concerned about those type of things.
Yeah, absolutely. No one can go. These cops say, "Listen, you can't drive 5 blocks without having some reason to pull this guy over." And no one can live your life. You're filling out applications here and there. You don't remember every date, every income tax number. It's so easy for them. And then they get you on mail fraud and all that crazy stuff. So forget it.
That's right. Well, Well, the federal laws just keep increasing every year. They keep writing more and more and more of them. And so, the average American probably breaks 10 laws a day unaware. I mean, that's maybe that's a wrong statistic, but I'm throwing that out there. But it's certainly within reason, because if you look at the buildup of federal laws on the books, if you want to look at the buildup of our arms, now I certainly don't think it's a bad thing for us to have a strong national defense. But at the same time, if you look at the amount of money that's escalated since World War II and what we spend on a defense budget, you could take every country in the world and multiply it by whatever you want, and then there's our number. So it's again, I'm not advocating that we don't have a strong defense, but I think a lot of this is being allocated in maybe not the correct way.
Well, Mr. Fulton, I want to thank you. You've been a heroic caretaker of this material and this information. You've been very professional, very responsible with what you're doing here, and you're heroic. We have a couple of minutes left. What do you want to leave us with?
Well, I guess I'd like to leave you with 2 things. One, there was a security officer at Parkland Hospital. This is just a small piece of information to think about. That officer was given 2 pieces of evidence in Parkland Hospital. One was a bullet found on the stretcher, which I believe they called CE-399. The other was a wristwatch that John Kennedy was wearing that was very close to the head wound. Wasn't supposed to be in the car, wasn't supposed to be wearing that day. So both of these pieces of evidence were in this person's possession at the same time. One of those pieces led to the big cover-up in U.S. history of the facts for the American people, and the other was used to covertly, to avert World War III. And I find that the juxtaposition of that very interesting. And of course, everybody in America knows about CE-399, but they don't know about the other evidence that Bobby Kennedy utilized to keep us out of war. The other thing I'd like to leave you with is the fact that I owe it. It's not just my story. It doesn't belong to Bobby Kennedy's mantle. It doesn't belong to Robert White or just myself or JFK Jr. or any of these people. It belongs to the American public. And so in that, I hope I'm doing the responsible and right thing, and I hope it's a positive effect by putting this information out there.
Well, thank you so much. People can find you at cmfulton.com. You're going to be on Coast to Coast AM with George Noory on the 21st, 10 p.m. And the book is called The Inheritance, Poisoned Fruit of JFK's Assassination. It'll be in the Opperman Report bookstore. You can get it on Amazon. It's Tryon Day Press. Good old Chris Milligan over there, Tryon Day Press. Thank you so much, Mr. Fulton.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Good night. Okay, so then we had Christopher Fulton. We'll be right back after these messages, a little wrap-up stuff. Hey, do you like what you're hearing? Do you like the work that you see us doing here at Opperman Report? You can support that work by becoming a member at OppermanReport.com. And as you have access to over 200 exclusive shows and interviews that you can't find on YouTube or Spreaker or iHeart or iTunes or KYAH. You can't find them anywhere else online, exclusive to our member sections, to our members. Also, too, there's images, videos, documents, court docs, a lot of content there at OppermanReport.com. And it's the memberships that support the Opperman Report and allow us to play these shows for free on Friday nights and Saturday nights on all the stations you hear us on. You can also make a donation at OppermanReport.com. If you want to support the show and become a member, I can give you a discount. I'll give you 13 months for $65 if you email me directly at OppermanReport@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can hear your ad played here on the Opperman Report, reach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people on a daily basis because the show is repeated every day all over the world. Contact me at OppermanReport@gmail.com and I'll give you a good deal on advertising rates.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Opperman.
Okay, welcome back. Thank you so much, Christopher Fulton, cmfulton.com, and the book is The Inheritance, Poison Fruit of JFK's Assassination. Hey, if you like today's show, please check out OppermanReport.com. We have our special exclusive members section with exclusive content, exclusive shows, and by become a subscriber to Opperman Report, that's what keeps the show on the air. As a matter of fact, right now we're dropping a lot of stuff. Awake Radio's off the air, and we're losing KYAH. We can't support that anymore. So really, if you want to keep the show on the air for another year, we got to get some memberships in here and some funding to come in. You can also make a donation, or you can advertise on the show. If you can advertise, we get some sponsors. We could be adding more stations instead of losing stations. So, you know, we got a lot of listeners out there. So if you can just please support the show and keep us on the air, that would be really nice. Thank you very much. All right. Good night.